Hello everyone. It's literary criticism lecture number 5. In the previous lectures we discussed about Aristotle and Plato in details, and also we discussed about literary criticism and its functions in English literature. Today we are talking about Longinus and the Sublime. Cassius Longinus. He was a Greek poet of 3rd century, though the work Longinus and the Sublime was written in 1st century, and this was the writer of 3rd century AD, and most of the researchers they considered Longinus the writer of and the Sublime. Longinus, Cassius Longinus, is considered the greatest work, and the Sublime is considered the greatest work in the history of English criticism. Is the work on the Sublime was first introduced by an Italian writer, Francesco Bertello, in 1554. As Longinus himself says that when our intellects, our emotions, and our wills harmoniously respond to a given work of art, we know we have been touched by the Sublime. Like it is, what is literature for him that even both the listener and the reader thoughts have been taken away to extreme or loftiness, and it elevates our thoughts. Longinus is the author, like the actual author is unknown, but is conventionally referred to as Longinus or Pseudo-Longinus, or the actual name of Longinus was Cassius Longinus, who was born in the 3rd century and was very much inspired from Plato's ideologies of poetry. Here, it is regarded as a classic work on aesthetics and the effects of good writing. The treatise highlights examples of good and bad writing from the previous millennium, focusing particularly on what may lead to the sublimity or to the sublime. A great piece of art or work, it's not just to bring pleasure or happiness. Literature has got many other things to do. It takes us away from where we are. It takes us, every person, from himself. It takes our thoughts into sublimity. जिंदगी में सुनने और पढ़ने वाले के thoughts को it takes it away, ऊपर उठाता है. What is meant by elevation? It brings extreme happiness. Before him, or before Cassius Longinus, the critics believed that the function of poetry was to instruct or to delight. It instructs us, and it is, or both, and if it is prose, its function was to persuade also. But Longinus, he went in a different direction and was not satisfied with the previous critics, as the aim of a great work of art is to transport the reader out of himself, the reader and the listener. The great work of art takes both listener and reader thoughts away. It elevates it has a capacity to move the reader to divine joy. This is the philosophy of sublimity. So, great work of art does not only please or instruct. It's not just like great literature has many other things to do, as I said, that it's not just pleasure or it, but poetry has got its own taste and pleasure. Poetry सिर्फ खुशी देने के लिए नहीं, बल्कि it has got its own taste and many other things to do. It brings extreme happiness. It pleases all and it pleases all the time. He believed that nothing is poetry unless it transports. It transports means it takes us away from ourselves. Like the person, the reader and the listener's thoughts have been affected by that art, poetry. According to him, the work of art becomes excellent only when it has power to sublimate. By sublimity, Longinus means elevation or loftiness, or a certain distinction and excellence in composition. Here, like the composition, the figures of speech, diction, the language he uses, the rhythm he uses in his poetry. It is not the art that makes us. It is the art, actually the art that makes us. Like he talks about the poets that even we must not know the techniques of art, but we must know the art that creates us. And if our thoughts are the best, that will create the best creation. According to him, the work of art becomes excellent. It becomes excellent when it has power to sublimate. For him, अगर आपकी poem, आपकी art वो excellent नहीं होगा, the figure of speech we are using वो बनावटी होंगे, baseless words we are using, and he warns the writers that baseless figures of speech, keep yourself away from that. The form of the sublime and the sublime is both a treatise on aesthetics and a work of literary criticism. It is written in an epistolary form, and the final part, possibly dealing with public speaking, has been lost. Like इसका ज़्यादातर हिस्सा जो लास्ट में लिखा गया है, it was about public speaking, and it has been lost. And on the Sublime is a compendium of literary exemplars. And most of the examples he has taken from Plato's in that era, and with about 50 authors spanning 100,000 years mentioned are quoted, along with the expected examples from Homer and other figures of Greek culture. Longinus refers to a passage from Genesis which is quite unusual for the first century. Like in the first century, as I mentioned earlier, that this work, it is from first century, though Longinus was born in the 3rd century, and most of his अपने examples के साथ we have come to know that he was very much inspired from Plato. Plato's के ideology से वो inspired था. Now, the Sublime, what are the things he included, or what is his claim? The strategies he adopted are the things he pointed in his work. Longinus critically applauds and condemns certain literary works as examples of good or bad styles of writing. For him, like the ideology of good and bad, he has denied that Longinus ultimately promotes an elevation of style and an essence of simplicity. The style, diction, passions, thoughts, the appropriate use of figures of speech, and to quote this famous author, the first and most important source of sublimity is the power of forming great conceptions. Scott James is called Longinus the first romantic critic. He was the first romantic critic, as this title has been given by James Scott. The concept of the sublime is generally accepted to refer to a style of writing that elevates itself above the ordinary. Finally, Longinus sets out 5 sources of sublimity. For him, 5 sources of sublimity has been explained by Longinus in his work on the sublime. The first thing, that is great thoughts, that our thoughts must be great. इस वो पोइट से कहता था अक्सर कि आर्ट की टेक्निक्स को मत समझो, बल्कि आर्ट को तुम्हें बनाना है. यू हैव टू क्रिएट द आर्ट. अगर हमारे थॉट्स जो हैं वो बेस्ट होंगे तो इनका क्रिएशन भी बेस्ट होगा. स्ट्रांग इमोशंस दैट लीड्स टू स्ट्रांग इमेजिनेशंस. सर्टन फिगर्स ऑफ स्पीच, figures of thought and speech. And he also warns us that we must use great figures of speech, appropriate figures of speech. We must keep ourselves away ये बनावटी figures of speech से बरी है literature. और उसने खबरदार किया है कि हमने इससे दूर रहना है. अगर हम चाहते हैं कि we create best arts, so we must keep ourselves away from baseless words. Is like Shakespeare says that brevity is the soul of wit. We must be selective in our words. And noble diction, the use of language, सही इस्तेमाल, ज़बान लैंग्वेज का सही इस्तेमाल. एंड डिग्निफाइड वर्ड्स अरेंजमेंट और स्टाइल मस्ट बी elevated. The effects of the sublime are loss of rationality and alienation, leading to identification with the creative process of the artist in a deep emotion mixed in pleasure and exaltation. An example of sublime which the author quotes in the work is a poem by Sappho, the so-called Ode to Jealousy, defined as a sublime ode. A writer's goal is not so much to express empty feelings but to arouse emotion in his audience. इस सुनने और पढ़ने वाले के thoughts को हमेशा it elevates them. His ideas about sublimity, natural sublimity and artificial sublimity. Extreme happiness are we have to natural inborn sources are natural sublimity, aspiration to vigorous concept and strong and enthusiastic passion. And acquirable sources are artificial sublimity. It's the use of words and lexicon and dignified and high composition are with the help of figures of speech we create our art. Then the sublime is a mechanism of recognition arising from the impact of work of art, of the greatness of a spirit, of the depth of an idea, of the power of speech. Thus Longinus is the golden balance between Plato and Aristotle, Homer and Shelley, classicism and romanticism, down to Eliot's modernism. As a critic, he displays a rare breadth and universality of outlook. Moreover, his mind is free from any prejudice. His judgments are essentially apt. They have been supported by posterity. Atkins believes there are, in short, many respects in which Longinus stands high as a judicial critic. His mind is free from prejudice, as he was very much inspired from Plato than Aristotle as the Greek writers. He was the first romantic critic. According to Longinus, the purpose of the greatest writer has been to introduce, to delight, and to persuade. but their greatness lies in sublimity. Every work of art that must be sublime in his thoughts is the echo of a great soul, of a lofty mind. It is not merely an excellence in language, but it is the note that rings from a great mind. It lies in intensity and a certain distinction in consummation of excellence in expression. A work of genius must aim at ecstasy. In other words, it is the combination of the true, the good, and the beautiful that makes a work great. Good luck and thank you.